Hello everyone and welcome back. Tonight we're diving into a wild thought experiment, something almost unimaginable. What if, in the heart of the Middle Ages, when castles stood tall, knights rode into battle, and kingdoms clashed for power, aliens invaded Earth? How would medieval societies react to otherworldly visitors armed with technology far beyond their wildest dreams? Would the people see them as gods, demons, or something else entirely? Stick around, because we're about to reimagine history like never before. It began in whispers, as so many disasters do. In the year of our Lord 1173, in the rolling fields of Aquitaine, peasants spoke of lights in the heavens that danced like torches carried by angels. Monks recorded them as omens, signs that Christ would soon return. But shepherds in the hills told darker tales, that the sheep would not graze beneath those lights, that the dogs howled as if sensing a wolf greater than any beast of the forest. In monasteries, scribes bent over their parchments by candlelight and painted the skies with streaks of silver and emerald, believing them to be celestial portents. Kings, meanwhile, had other concerns: lands to conquer, taxes to raise, rebellions to crush. Few listened when word spread that strange pits had opened in the countryside, and that from those pits came sounds of grinding, unnatural as iron dragged over bone. The first true encounter came in the forests near Cologne. A hunting party of noblemen vanished, their hounds returning days later without a mark on them, but their eyes clouded with milky whiteness as if blind. The bodies of the lords were found afterward, not torn apart by boar or bear, but with flesh seared in ways no fire left behind. Villagers whispered that Saint Michael had smitten them for their sins. Priests preached repentance. Yet one young page who survived claimed he saw towering shadows that moved without sound, and lights that burned holes through trees. His testimony was written down, mocked and forgotten. But the invasion did not care for belief. It moved silently, deliberately. Unlike wars of men, it carried no banners, no heralds, no priests to justify conquest. When the first great cities saw the descent, Paris, York, Toledo, people believed Judgment Day had arrived. Bells tolled frantically as shapes blotted the stars. The air grew heavy, humming like unseen bees, and torches guttered though no wind blew. Then the fire fell. Not flame as men knew, but lines of brilliance that melted stone and sundered iron. Knights charged on horseback toward the intruders, lances lowered, banners snapping. They never returned. Chroniclers wrote of the metal giants who strode across the fields, whose arms spat light sharper than swords, whose armor no blade could pierce. Yet humanity did not break immediately. That is the miracle of stories. They turned terror into meaning. To the Christians, these beings were demons, tempters sent by the devil himself. To the Norse, they were Jotnar, giants come from beyond the 9 realms. To the Moors of Al-Andalus, they were Ifrit, spirits of fire and smoke. No matter the faith, people framed them in myth. That gave courage, for demons could be banished, giants slain, spirits outwitted. And so, the wars of Earth did not end when the sky fell. They transformed. Crusaders leaving for the Holy Land found themselves redirected, not by papal decree, but by the chaos descending upon their very shores. Kings who once bickered over borders sent envoys to rivals, speaking of strange threats greater than any army of man. But unity came slowly, for mistrust is older than courage, and while men debated, villages burned. Still, humanity has always been stubborn. Beneath the shadow of castles, among the flickering candles of abbeys, in the smoke-filled taverns of towns, ideas stirred. If steel could not cut these invaders, perhaps fire could. If horses fell, perhaps catapults might prevail. And above all, if faith was shaken, stories remained strong. A knight slain by the invaders became a martyr. A village that drove them back through cunning traps became legend. This was the dawn of a war no parchment had ever recorded before. Not of king against king, nor of faith against faith, but of mankind itself against the unknown. And in the heart of Europe, as peasants fled, as priests prayed, as nobles armed, a question trembled in every mind. Could the stories that bound them together be strong enough to save them, or would the invaders write the final tale? The first winter of invasion was marked by silence. Fields lay fallow, not because of drought or plague, but because men dared not step into the open where shadows from the sky prowled. Merchants abandoned their routes, and the veins of trade that had once fed kingdoms dried to dust. In the great courts, kings argued endlessly. Some claimed it was a divine test, others that it was sorcery wrought by rival lords. Only a handful whispered the truth, that this was an enemy beyond earth itself. Word spread of a massacre in Flanders. A caravan of pilgrims bound for Canterbury was found charred to husks upon the road. Their bones fused to the earth as though the very ground had swallowed fire. Only one relic survived unscathed, a silver cross held by a nun, untouched though her body was blackened. Priests seized upon it as proof that faith was the shield of man. Others muttered that the invaders feared holy symbols. Such stories gave rise to desperate courage. Villagers began hanging crucifixes on their doors, Norsemen carved runes of Thor upon their shields, and Muslim scholars inscribed verses of the Quran upon their city gates. Yet when the invaders struck again, symbols burned as easily as flesh. In the courts of Rome, Pope Alexander III declared the invaders demons sent to punish mankind's sins. He called for prayer, fasting, and renewed crusades, but this time not against Muslims nor heretics, but against the beings from the stars. Knights Templar, hardened from years in the Holy Land, found themselves pledged to a new war, swearing oaths to defend Christendom against the legions of the fallen angel. Yet even their famed discipline crumbled when faced with weapons that seared stone walls as if they were parchment. Meanwhile, in the frozen north, sagas began to sing of strange battles. A band of Norse raiders claimed to have toppled one of the giants by luring it onto thin ice, where the beast crashed through and sank into the black waters. The tale spread quickly, becoming a beacon of hope across the fjords. Was it true? None could say, but men clung to it, for in a world of fire from the sky, even a rumor of victory was treasure. The Moors of Al-Andalus faced their own trials. Cities like Córdoba and Seville, once jewels of knowledge and culture, trembled beneath shadows. Scholars gathered in secret, poring over ancient texts of Greek and Persian philosophy, seeking any wisdom about the heavens. Some argued that these beings were not demons but travelers, like men who crossed seas to conquer foreign shores. If they bled, then they could be slain. If they hungered, then they could be starved. To the philosophers, knowledge became their weapon, though few kings had patience for scrolls when fire rained from above. It was in these years that a new pattern emerged. The invaders did not kill indiscriminately. Some towns they burned to ash, others they left untouched, watching from afar. It was as though they measured humanity, probing its strengths and weaknesses. A monk in Burgundy wrote, "They strike not as wolves, who hunger, nor as men, who desire gold. They strike as scholars, who test." This notion terrified even the boldest warlords, for if the enemy was testing mankind, then the true war had not yet begun. Resistance formed slowly, scattered across lands divided by language, faith, and blood. Yet the pressure of survival forced unity where treaties never could. A knight of England found himself fighting beside a Moorish archer. A Viking raider shared ale with a French peasant after both survived an attack. Bonds formed in fire, stronger than crowns could ever bind. And in the shadows, whispers grew louder. Some said a weapon had been discovered in the east, a relic of such power that it had wounded the invaders. Others claimed it was but rumor, a tale to keep hope alive. Yet caravans still risked the roads, carrying word that beyond the Byzantine lands, strange devices of ancient origin might hold the key to salvation. The Middle Ages had been a world of kingdoms and crusades, swords and prayer. Now it was becoming something far different, a world united not by choice, but by the terror of the stars. The year 1176 dawned beneath skies that no longer belonged to man. Comets of light, though no astronomer had seen such stars before, traced the heavens at night, moving with precision instead of the wandering arcs of nature. People feared to look up, for the lights seemed to notice, pausing above villages as if to mark the souls who gazed back. In France, a boy named Etienne claimed to have spoken with one of the sky demons. His tale spread like wildfire. He said the creature made no sound, but filled his mind with voices, showing him visions of worlds with twin suns, seas that boiled, mountains that glowed like furnaces. Most dismissed him as mad. Yet some priests whispered that such visions were temptations, an echo of the serpent's lies in Eden. Still, Etienne's name lingered, for his account hinted that the invaders could reach into the mind itself. This rumor carried grave weight when coupled with what occurred in the Holy Roman Empire. Entire villages began to vanish without bloodshed. No corpses, no burning, no ruin. Fields remained tilled, food still lay on tables, but the people were gone. Chroniclers recorded the eerie stillness of these places, calling them empty hives. Some claimed the invaders had harvested souls, others that they carried men and women into the sky for dark purposes. A handful of wanderers later reappeared, wandering the roads in tattered clothes, eyes vacant, muttering of endless light. No sword nor sermon could restore them. Europe trembled, yet Europe also adapted. The feudal order, rigid as stone, began to crack under necessity. Lords who once fought neighbors for scraps of land now sent their knights to defend peasants instead of exploit them, because without peasants fields starved, and without food armies perished. In castles, alchemists were summoned not for amusement but for desperate invention. They mixed oils, saltpeter, and resin to craft firepots hurled from catapults, hoping to mimic the flames that rained from the sky. In Constantinople, the Byzantine Emperor Manuel I Komnenos gathered engineers and scholars to study the invaders' patterns. Reports arrived daily. The enemy avoided rivers yet favored high plains. They attacked after new moons but rarely under full ones. Were these true patterns, or the illusions of frightened men? The emperor ordered every scrap written and collected, for knowledge was becoming as precious as steel. Yet it was not only kings who rose to the moment. Across the countryside, common folk began their own resistance. In Saxony, villagers dug pits lined with sharpened stakes, luring one of the giant machines into collapse. Though the creature tore free, it left behind shards of strange black metal, harder than iron, which the villagers guarded as holy relics. In Spain, Moorish farmers learned to cover their fields with reflective plates of polished bronze, blinding the invaders' eyes in daylight. Such small victories wove themselves into legend, fueling courage across the continent. But for every tale of triumph, there were 100 of despair. London burned in the spring, not from rebellion nor accident, but from the sweep of a single beam that turned the Thames into steam and left stone bridges sagging like wax. Chroniclers wept as they wrote of St. Paul's, its towers glowing red before collapsing into dust. Survivors fled north, speaking of monsters that drifted through smoke like hunters savoring a kill. The invaders had no need of siege engines, no patience for diplomacy. They struck, observed, withdrew, leaving men to argue whether they were being tested or culled. Yet a truth emerged, whispered in taverns and abbeys alike. The invaders were not invincible. They could stumble, they could bleed, and, most importantly, they could be delayed. Humanity could not yet defeat them, but perhaps it could endure. And so, alliances that once seemed impossible began to take shape. Messengers rode from the Pope to Cordoba, from Constantinople to the Viking Jarls. Letters written in Latin, Arabic, and Old Norse carried the same desperate plea, "Let us stand as one, or none shall stand at all." The world of the Middle Ages, fractured by faith and war, was slowly, painfully becoming something greater. A world forced to think not of heaven, not of kings, but of survival itself. By the summer of 1177, the kings of Europe could no longer pretend the invasion was a passing storm. Too many cities smoldered, too many roads lay abandoned, too many villagers spoke of fire from the heavens. Yet even as survival demanded unity, old grudges clung like chains. In Westminster, King Henry II of England gathered his barons and bishops. Some urged him to send tribute to the Sky Lords, believing gold or grain might appease them. Others roared that no demon could be bought, only slain. Henry himself, cunning and weary, asked the only question that mattered. If they are gods, why do they walk among us as men? If they are demons, why do they bleed when struck? If they are neither, then they are but invaders, and invaders can be resisted. Across the Channel, King Louis VII of France thought differently. He ordered every relic, every bone of saint and sliver of the true cross, paraded through Paris in solemn procession. Thousands of peasants knelt in muddy streets praying for divine deliverance, yet no miracle came. When the invaders descended days later, they struck the outskirts of the city. The relics survived, but the fields burned, and the lesson was cruel. Faith alone would not drive back the fire. In the east, Emperor Manuel of Byzantium proved more pragmatic. He summoned Greek fire, the empire's most closely guarded weapon, a liquid flame that clung to water and devoured ships whole. With trembling hands, his alchemists modified it for use on land. When the invaders came near the city walls, catapults hurled clay jars of the substance. For the first time, witnesses swore. The enemy recoiled. One of their machines staggered, burning in unnatural shrieks before collapsing in molten ruin. Constantinople rejoiced. Bells rang. Hymns filled Hagia Sophia. Yet Manuel, ever cautious, warned his court. A single victory is not a war won. They will learn as we learn. And indeed, they did. By winter, the invaders adapted, their armor gleaming with strange sheen that repelled even the burning fury of Greek fire. What had been triumph turned again into despair, but humanity was not finished. Across Christendom and Islam alike, something radical began to stir. Knowledge moved. Scholars who once hoarded wisdom within cloistered libraries now shared secrets across borders. Arabic treatises on astronomy reached Paris, while Latin chronicles of warfare traveled to Cairo. Norsemen told Byzantine envoys of their icy stratagems. Ideas, long locked in kingdoms and faiths, began to flow like rivers freed of ice. Meanwhile, among the common folk, myths flourished. Some told of blacksmiths who forged swords from shards of fallen invader metal, blades that never dulled. Others swore they had seen angels battling the sky demons in clouds above the Alps. In taverns, men spoke of hidden fortresses where kings and caliphs plotted a grand alliance. These were stories, yes, but stories gave hope, and hope was a weapon sharper than steel. Then came the siege of Toledo. The city, jewel of Al-Andalus, stood defiant when the invaders descended. Moors and Christians alike took up arms, hurling stones, fire, and prayers against the onslaught. For 3 nights the sky blazed as beams carved the earth. On the 4th, something astonishing occurred. The invaders withdrew. Survivors swore they saw their ships stagger, as if struck by unseen force. Scholars later claimed that the city's great libraries, filled with ancient instruments of study, had been turned into weapons of light by desperate thinkers. The truth may never be known. What mattered was this: a city of men had endured, and that endurance echoed across the world. By now, the invaders must have realized what kings had long known, that mankind could not be easily broken. Fear did not make men bow. It made them fight harder. And so, the struggle entered a new stage. Not merely survival, but defiance. In the year 1178, a council unlike any in history gathered upon the rocky shores of Sicily, the island, crossroads of 3 worlds, Latin, Greek, and Arab, became the meeting ground of kings, caliphs, and jarls. There, beneath banners of cross, crescent, and raven, humanity attempted something never before seen: unity. The meeting was uneasy from the first. The Pope's envoys demanded the Moors convert before alliances could be considered. The Moorish scholars scoffed, declaring that survival left no time for baptism. Viking chieftains, bare-armed and restless, laughed at both sides, declaring that gods mattered little when giants from the stars stalked the earth. For days, words clashed like swords, but as the council bickered, the invaders struck Palermo itself. Beams of light scorched the harbor, ships turned to ash in moments, and the sea boiled. The council fled into the catacombs beneath the city, where, amid the stench of smoke and death, they realized no creed nor crown would save them divided. It was there, by torchlight, that the Pact of Sicily was sworn. Not a treaty of kings, but an oath of warriors, Knights of France clasped hands with Moorish archers, Norse jarls poured mead into Byzantine chalices, and emperors stood shoulder to shoulder with peasants who had never seen a throne. The pact was simple. We fight as one until the sky demons are driven from our soil, or until none of us remain to fight. Out of this pact came the first true coalition army. From England rode armored knights, their lances sharpened not for jousts but for machines. From the deserts of Al-Andalus came cavalry swift as shadows, wielding composite bows that could pierce armor. The Byzantines brought siege engines and Greek fire, while the Norse carried axes, hammers, and cunning tricks born of long winters. Each people brought their own strength and their own stories. The invaders learned of this unity at the Battle of Verona. They descended upon the plains of Italy, expecting another city to harvest and another army to scatter. Instead, they met a wall of steel and fire unlike any before. Knights thundered forward, shields raised high as Moorish arrows darkened the sky. Behind them, Byzantine trebuchets hurled jars of flaming oil, while Norsemen lay in wait with pits and chains to entangle the towering machines. The clash was chaos. Beams carved through knights like wheat before the scythe, yet for every man who fell, another rose. A Moorish archer brought down an invader scout with a shaft tipped by metal scavenged from their own wrecks. A Norse warrior leapt upon one of the giants, driving his axe into its joints until sparks flew and the machine toppled, crushing the field. It was no easy victory. Thousands died, the fields ran red, and Verona burned. But when dawn broke, the impossible had happened. The invaders had retreated. Survivors swore they heard a strange keening in the night sky, as though the beings themselves lamented. The news spread faster than fire. For the first time, humanity had stood not as fragments, but as a single blade, and the blade had cut. Priests declared it a sign of God's favor. Skalds sang it as Ragnarok begun, where men had wounded the giants. Scholars recorded it as proof that unity bore strength. But beneath the triumph lurked unease. The invaders had tested, observed, and adapted before. What if Verona was only another trial? What if mankind's first great victory was merely the beginning of a far greater storm? Still, in taverns, abbeys, and longhouses alike, people lifted cups to a new tale, the day Earth struck back. Victory at Verona lit a spark in men's hearts, but sparks draw storms. The invaders had been forced to retreat, yes, but they had not been broken. In the months that followed, their response came swift and merciless. It began with whispers in the coalition camp. Men woke in the night screaming, swearing they heard voices that were not their own. A knight of Normandy stabbed his brother in arms after claiming the man had been replaced by a shadow with human skin. Moorish archers deserted in terror, swearing that shapes in the dark took the form of their dead kin, beckoning them toward the forests. When scouts investigated, they found nothing, save footprints burned into the soil, glowing faintly under moonlight. The invaders had learned that blades were not enough. Now they sought to unmake unity by turning fear inward. At first, the commanders dismissed these tales as exhaustion, but soon the evidence was undeniable. Whole patrols vanished, leaving only armor and weapons behind, as though their wearers had dissolved into air. Messengers rode between camps with reports of traitors, saboteurs, and spies, though none could prove a word of it. Trust, already fragile among peoples divided by centuries of blood and faith, began to crack. The breaking point came at the siege of Carcassonne. The coalition had fortified the old stone citadel, believing its thick walls could shield them. For days, the enemy prowled the skies but did not strike. Then, on a moonless night, strange lights flickered in the courtyards. Guards swore their comrades walked into the glow and never returned. When the attack finally came, it was not from above but from within. Figures wearing the armor of fallen men appeared, moving stiffly, their eyes glowing like embers. Panic spread. Some swore these were corpses raised by sorcery. Others claimed they were illusions meant to break morale. Whatever they were, their presence shattered the defense. By dawn, Carcassonne was ash, its survivors scattered across the hills. The invaders had shown their hand. They could not only strike with fire and steel, but with fear itself. Yet even in disaster, humanity found strange strength. A Cistercian monk, Brother Arnulf recorded the fall of Carcassonne and sent his chronicle to every abbey he could reach. His words spread. They seek to divide us, but fear is their weapon, and faith in one another, is ours. His parchment became a rallying cry, copied and carried by messengers, recited by peasants and kings alike. Still, the coalition knew that unity alone would not suffice. They needed weapons worthy of the enemy. Byzantines pressed their alchemists to refine Greek fire into new forms. Moorish scholars in Cordoba sought to harness the sun with polished mirrors to scorch the invaders' machines. Norse smiths hammered shards of fallen metal into spearheads that glowed faintly, whispering that they might pierce alien armor. And yet, the most daring proposal came from the east. Rumors carried from the steppes spoke of riders who claimed to have captured one of the invaders alive. Or at least, something that looked alive beneath its shell of armor. If true, it was a prize beyond measure, proof that the enemy was not untouchable, that they had form, weakness, perhaps even fear. Caravans and emissaries rode toward the east, chasing shadows of truth. Behind them, Europe burned. Ahead, perhaps, lay answers. For the war of swords and fire was becoming something greater, a war of knowledge. The road eastward was long and perilous, stretching across mountains and steppes, through lands where the coalition's banners carried little weight. Yet the rumor of a captured invader drew men like moths to flame. Kings sent emissaries, scholars, and even spies, for if such a prize existed, it could alter the course of the war. It was the riders of the Kipchak steppe who first spread the tale. They spoke of a night when the sky tore open with fire, and a metal beast plummeted into the grasslands. Unlike the towers and giants that strode Europe, this was smaller, swift, built for hunting. The riders swarmed it before it could rise again, binding it with chains of iron and burying it beneath earth and stone. Some swore that within its husk they found a creature, pale and glimmering, its eyes black as obsidian, its skin slick like that of a fish. The stories differed in every telling. Some said it screamed like a man when cut. Others claimed it uttered no sound at all, but filled the air with whispers that made warriors turn their blades upon each other. A few whispered that the riders had not slain it, but kept it caged, feeding it like livestock. When word reached Constantinople, Emperor Manuel dispatched his most trusted envoy, Alexios of Trebizond, with orders to uncover the truth. Moorish scholars joined him, eager to study the being, and Norse mercenaries rode to guard them. It was, in miniature, the coalition itself, a fragile company bound by rumor and desperation. Weeks turned to months as they rode east, and along the way they gathered fragments of strange knowledge. Villagers in the Carpathians told of rivers fouled by black slime that burned the flesh. Armenian monks spoke of visions, of stars wheeling unnaturally in the sky. In the markets of Tabriz, merchants swore they had seen relics of alien craft traded like silver, shards that glowed faintly, compasses that spun wildly in the presence of iron. Finally, on the edge of the steppes, they found the Kipchaks. The nomads led them to a pit carved into the earth, covered with hides and guarded day and night. Within, chained and bound, was something that should not have existed. It was no demon, nor angel, nor beast of fable. The creature was frail, its limbs thin, its skin shimmering faintly under torchlight. Its eyes, vast and dark, reflected everything, yet revealed nothing. When Alexios looked upon it, he felt the weight of the sky pressing upon his chest, as though he were staring into an ocean without end. The scholars quarreled at once. Some cried it was a devil to be burned. Others insisted it must be studied, for its secrets could save mankind. The Norse, less patient, muttered that it should be slain before it bewitched them all. Yet before any decision was reached, the creature moved. Not with chains broken nor strength revealed, but with a voice, not of sound, but of thought. In the minds of all present, words formed. "You are not the first." The pit fell silent. The scholars trembled, crossing themselves or reciting verses. Alexios demanded to know what it meant. The creature's eyes flickered like stars in deep water. Again the voice, "Others before you, others after you. Worlds burn, worlds resist, few endure." The words chilled them more than any beam of fire. For in that moment they understood. This war was not unique. The invaders had walked this path before, across worlds unseen, and mankind was but the latest in a long, grim tale. The Kipchaks, terrified by the whispers, urged the envoys to take the creature and be gone. And so, with chains and wagons, they carried it westward, toward Constantinople, toward the heart of the coalition. For the first time, humanity did not only resist, it had captured a piece of the enemy, and with it, perhaps, a chance to change the story. When the wagon bearing the chained creature entered Constantinople in the spring of 1179, the city erupted with awe and terror. Crowds pressed against the streets, crossing themselves, some weeping, some hurling stones, others kneeling as if in worship. Never before had men laid eyes upon one of the sky demons so closely. Emperor Manuel ordered the creature taken to the Blacherny Palace, where it was confined beneath vaulted stone halls, guarded by the Varangian Guard, axe-bearing Norsemen sworn to his service. No monk nor priest was permitted to execute it, though many demanded its death. "If it is a devil," Manuel declared, "then it shall not be burned in haste. For devils do not bleed as this one does, nor chain as this one is chained. Knowledge is the sword with which we must strike." Thus began the first interrogation. The creature sat silently in its bonds, frail yet unbroken, its vast eyes unblinking. Scholars of many tongues, Greek, Latin, Arabic, attempted speech, but it answered none with voice. Instead, the same silent whisper filled the minds of those present. To some, it spoke in their native tongue. To others, it revealed visions, cities of metal, suns torn apart, landscapes scarred by fire. Brother Arnulf, the monk whose words had rallied Europe after Carcassonne, was summoned to record all. He described the experience as standing in a storm of thought, not one's own. When asked why its kind invaded, the being gave no answer, save one phrase repeated like a tolling bell: "The cycle must be fulfilled." When pressed further, what cycle? Why Earth? Why now? The whispers fractured into images. Scholars saw a wheel of worlds, each in turn consumed by flame. They saw beings standing, resisting, falling. They saw themselves, men in armor, peasants with pitchforks, women cradling children, all turned to ash beneath light. Yet always the wheel turned again, as if resistance itself were part of the design. Some fell to their knees, declaring that mankind was doomed by fate. Others rose in fury, swearing that if there was a wheel, they would shatter it. The greatest revelation came when the being's flesh was tested. Physicians dared to draw its blood, thick, dark, glimmering faintly. When applied to steel, it hardened the blade. When mixed with fire, it burned longer and hotter than oil. The Norse smiths rejoiced, claiming at last they had found a weapon fit for giants. But the scholars warned of peril. To wield the enemy's essence might taint the soul of man. Meanwhile, outside the palace walls, the city seethed. Some hailed the captive as proof that the invaders could be bested. Others feared it brought a curse upon Constantinople. Priests thundered from pulpits that harboring such a creature was blasphemy. Crowds rioted, demanding it be destroyed. And all the while, the invaders watched. For nights afterward, strange lights hovered over the Bosporus, as though the sky itself peered down, searching for its lost child. The people whispered that a reckoning was coming. Emperor Manuel convened the coalition leaders in secret. The captive alien was proof of both hope and peril. If its kind sought to reclaim it, Constantinople itself might burn. Yet if its secrets could be unraveled, perhaps mankind could finally stand as more than prey. The council debated deep into the night. Some urged they slaughter the creature and scatter its remains. Others demanded they study it, wring every secret from its flesh. But one truth united them. The wheel must be broken, and humanity would not surrender its fate to stars. Thus began the greatest gamble of the Middle Ages, to make war not only with swords and faith, but with the knowledge of the very enemy that sought to destroy them. In the summer of 1180, Constantinople became both the beacon and the bait of mankind. The captive alien lay in its vaulted prison, studied by scholars and guarded by warriors, while its blood and fragments were tested in secret workshops along the Golden Horn. The city had never brimmed with such dangerous hope. The Norse smiths forged spearheads tipped with alloyed shards of the fallen machines, their edges biting deeper than steel ever could. Byzantine alchemists mixed the aliens' blood with Greek fire, producing a flame that burned white and clung like molten stars. Moorish physicians dissected the creature's flesh, learning that it mended wounds slowly, as though unused to violence. Even the monks, reluctant at first, copied every account into codices bound in gold, fearing and cherishing the knowledge alike. And then came the first weapon, a crossbow bolt dipped in the alien ichor, hardened in the sun until it glimmered faintly. When loosed against armor, it shattered iron plates as though they were clay. The demonstration left the council stunned. Humanity had always been the weaker. Now, for the first time, it had drawn strength from the invader's own veins. But knowledge has a price. Those who handled the aliens' blood reported visions in their sleep. Dreams of burning skies, endless wheels of destruction, oceans of stars. Some awoke screaming, others wept silently, and a few vanished, leaving only their tools behind. Whispers spread that the ichor carried not only strength, but madness. The debate raged. Should mankind wield such cursed power? Some declared it blasphemy, the corruption of God's creation. Others argued it was salvation itself. Before the matter could be settled, the sky answered. On a moonless night, Constantinople trembled as shadows blotted out the stars. Dozens of the invaders' craft descended, their lights searing the sea, their hum shaking the earth. Bells rang from Hagia Sophia, soldiers rushed to the walls, and the people cried that Judgment Day had come. But the city was ready. From the towers, bolts tipped with alien ichor streaked the night, piercing the smaller scouts and sending them crashing into the sea. Catapults hurled jars of white burning fire, and for the first time the machines reeled in pain. The Varangian guard charged through the gates, their axes glowing with shards hammered into the steel, hacking into the legs of the great walkers until sparks poured like rivers. The Battle of Constantinople raged until dawn. The invaders had come to reclaim their lost kin, but found a city armed with its secrets. For every tower they leveled, men rebuilt barricades in the smoke. For every soldier burned, another rose to take his place. When the sun climbed over the Bosporus, the impossible had occurred. The invaders withdrew. Their lights lifted into the sky, leaving behind wreckage smoldering in the waters. The people of Constantinople poured into the streets, shouting that victory had been given by God himself. Priests rang the bells until their arms ached, and Manuel declared the city the heart of resistance. Yet within the palace, the mood was darker. The captive alien had vanished during the night. Its chains lay broken, not by force, but as though it had been released from within. Some swore it had escaped, others whispered it had been taken back. A few believed the council itself had secretly slain it, fearing the risk it posed. None knew the truth. But one fact remained. The war had changed. Humanity could wound the invaders. Humanity could fight with their own weapons. And humanity had survived a siege that should have ended them. Still, the visions lingered. The wheel turned in men's dreams, unbroken, unending. Was Constantinople's triumph the beginning of freedom, or merely another step in the cycle the creature had warned of? The victory at Constantinople thundered across the world like a sermon from heaven. Messengers rode day and night, carrying tales of how the city of emperors had stood against the sky demons and lived. In taverns of Paris, peasants raised mugs and swore the end was near. Not the end of man, but the end of the invaders. In Cordoba, scholars praised the union of knowledge and courage, saying Allah had granted wisdom to mankind. Even in the icy halls of Norway, skalds sang of the Varangians who had split the giants, legs as though they were trees before the axe. The Pact of Sicily, once fragile as parchment, became iron. Kings who had doubted now sent men and gold. Lords who had hidden in castles now pledged fealty to the coalition. For the first time in memory, Christian, Muslim, and pagan alike looked not upon their rivals' banners, but upon the sky, the true enemy above. But hope is a dangerous flame, for with it came pride, and with pride, complacency. Some declared that mankind had found its salvation in the blood of the invaders. Blacksmiths forged swords with alloyed shards, calling them sky blades. Knights begged for bolts dipped in ichor, claiming no other weapon was worthy. Peasants even smeared their plows with the dark fluid, praying their fields would grow strong. A cult formed in Germany, worshipping the alien blood as divine essence, claiming the invaders themselves were angels misjudged. The Pope, fearing blasphemy, issued a bull forbidding the worship of alien relics, yet his words were ignored in many lands. The more men tasted power, the more they thirsted. Meanwhile, in the east, the Mongol tribes stirred. Word of Constantinople's stand reached them, and Khans debated whether to join this strange war. Some saw glory in it, others saw folly. Yet even they could not deny that the fire from the skies had scarred their steps as surely as Europe-US fields. The wheel spared no people, but the invaders did not sleep. For weeks after their retreat, the skies above Europe seemed strangely quiet. Fields grew green again, merchants returned to roads, laughter returned to marketplaces. It was as though the storm had passed, yet in the silence, wise men grew uneasy. The wolf steps back, warned Brother Arnulf, only to leap forward with greater hunger. And leap they did. The first signs came in the north. Fishermen on the Baltic returned with tales of the sea boiling, of shapes moving beneath the waves like serpents of iron. Then, in Ireland, entire monasteries vanished, leaving only blackened stone and ash. By midsummer, it was clear the invaders had changed their strategy. They no longer struck cities alone. They struck the land itself. Rivers turned black. Herds withered where the beams had passed. Grain rotted in fields untouched by flame. It was war, not of conquest, but of starvation. The coalition scrambled. Knights could meet steel with steel, but how to fight poisoned earth? Scholars worked night and day, studying the soil, the water, the strange black residue. Some claimed it was the invaders' true weapon. Not fire, not machines, but the unmaking of the world itself. And in the midst of this crisis, rumors returned of the vanished captive. Some whispered it had not been taken, but had walked free, leaving Constantinople willingly. Others swore it remained hidden in secret catacombs beneath Hagia Sophia, still whispering to chosen ears. A few claimed it moved among men now, cloaked in flesh, watching. Whether truth or tale, one thing became certain. The wheel was turning again. The victory at Constantinople had not broken it. It had only sped its revolutions. The poisoned earth was only the beginning. By 1181, the invaders revealed their true cruelty. They had studied mankind's resilience and turned it against them. In the valleys of the Rhine, farmers awoke to a low hum that shook the soil. At first they thought it was thunder. Then the earth itself split, and from the fissures rose machines unlike the towering giants of before. These were smaller, hunched like beasts, their limbs spindled and sharp, their movements swift as wolves. They did not burn cities from afar. They hunted men face to face. Where once knights had charged great walkers with courage, now they found themselves dragged screaming into the trees by things that moved faster than horses. Villages vanished overnight, leaving behind only blood-streaked walls and clawed soil. Priests called them demons. Norsemen called them Draugr of Iron. Moors named them Afarit. Whatever their name, they became the terror of the land. The coalition responded with desperation. Patrols doubled. Watchfires burned on every hill. Bells were strung through forests to warn of movement. But the new enemy was relentless. They struck not only the strongholds of kings, but the smallest hamlets, the loneliest farms. No place was safe. It was then that the experiments in Constantinople bore grim fruit. The alchemists refined their ichor fire into handheld flasks, which soldiers hurled like grenades. When the creatures were touched by that white flame, they shrieked and dissolved into slag. Yet those who carried the weapons often paid dearly. Many were driven to madness, plagued by dreams of alien skies. One Byzantine captain cut down half his own company in a frenzy, screaming that he must complete the cycle. The council argued furiously. Some demanded all use of alien relics be banned. Others swore without them, mankind had no chance. In the end, necessity prevailed. The weapons were distributed, but only to chosen warriors bound by oath and watched closely by priests. Meanwhile, in the Islamic world, scholars sought another path. In Cordoba and Damascus, astronomers charted the skies, searching for patterns in the invaders' movements. They noticed the creatures struck most fiercely beneath certain stars, withdrawing when constellations shifted. Could the heavens themselves hold the key? If so, perhaps knowledge, true knowledge, was the only weapon that could break the cycle. Yet the invaders pressed harder still. In the north, along the fjords, witnesses swore they saw shapes that were not machines at all but living, creatures of flesh and light, drifting above the waves like manta rays of fire. They devoured ships whole, leaving only charred timbers floating on the tide. Skalds sang that Jörmungandr, the world serpent, had risen at last. Others whispered that the invaders were no single people, but a host of species bound in conquest. In response, the coalition prepared a gamble. If the wheel had spun before, then perhaps its rhythm could be broken only with boldness. Word spread of a council in Acre, where commanders from Christendom, Islam, and the Norse world would gather to plan not defense, but attack. No longer would mankind cower behind walls, waiting for fire to fall. They would carry the war to the invaders' landing grounds, where the black pits and broken towers scarred the earth. It was a plan born of desperation, but also of defiance. For the first time, men dared not only to endure, but to strike at the heart of their oppressors. And somewhere unseen, the wheel turned faster. The city of Acre, long a contested prize between crusaders and sultans, became something wholly new in the spring of 1182, neutral ground. Beneath its salt-stained walls, warriors who once slit each other's throats now drank from the same cups, ate from the same fires, and spoke of enemies not across the desert but above the stars. The Council of Acre was unlike any gathering the world had ever seen. The Pope's legates sat beside Moorish imams. Byzantine generals unrolled maps beside Norse jarls. Jewish scholars, long ignored by kings, were invited for their knowledge of ancient texts. It was as if all the fractures of the known world had been forced, by terror, into a single vessel. Brother Arnulf recorded it in trembling script. Never have men of so many tongues bent their ears together, and never has silence been so heavy, for each knew that words spoken here would weigh the fate of the earth. The goal was bold, to strike the invaders not in defense, but at their strongholds. Scouts had mapped the black pits across Europe and the Levant, where strange towers rose like rotten teeth from the ground. These places, it was agreed, were not mere camps, but anchors, footholds from which the enemy poured forth. Destroy the anchors, and perhaps the tide could be slowed. But how? The Byzantine engineers proposed massive trebuchets hurling ichor fire, while Moorish scholars suggested mirrors to blind the invaders' weapons by sunlight. Norse jarls argued for sheer ferocity, rush the pits with axes, and tear down what could be torn. Each plan was met with doubts. The invaders adapted swiftly, as at Constantinople. To strike them would require cunning as well as courage. Then, from the east, came a voice little expected. An envoy of the Mongol tribes, clad in furs and smelling of smoke, told of how their riders had harried one of the great machines until it stumbled into a gorge. The demons, he said, are hunters, but even hunters can be driven into traps. His words struck the council like a spark upon dry tinder. The plan took form: draw the invaders into battle, not upon cities, but upon chosen fields where mankind held the advantage. Pits would be dug, fire prepared, ballistae loaded with ichor-tipped bolts. Knights would charge to lure, not to kill. Archers would harry from the flanks. And when the enemy stepped into the snares, the coalition would strike with every weapon, holy and unholy alike. It was a gamble worthy of the sagas. When the plan was set, the council sealed it, not with parchment, but with blood. Each leader, whether Christian, Muslim, Jew, or pagan, cut their palm and pressed it to the same stone. One earth, one war, they swore. And for a moment, brief, fragile, but real, the world was united. News of the council spread like wildfire. In villages and castles alike, men and women whispered of a great assault to come. Priests preached it as a crusade, not against brothers, but against demons. Imams spoke of it as a jihad for all mankind. Scalds called it the last hunt. Hope surged again, but fear gnawed just as fiercely. For if the plan failed, there would be no second chance. The invaders, too, seemed to sense the gathering storm. Their raids lessened. Their hunters pulled back. The skies grew quiet, not in mercy, but in watchfulness, as though they too awaited the coming clash. And so the year turned, and men sharpened their blades, women prepared the dead cloths, and children were taught to pray in many tongues. The war was no longer the invaders alone. It had become mankind's war. But deep in their hearts, even the bravest asked the question the alien captive had whispered before. Was this defiance truly a break in the wheel, or merely another turn? The year of the Great Offensive dawned with omens. Comets streaked the heavens, wolves howled at noon, and in many villages hens laid blackened eggs. Priests declared these signs of the Last Judgment, while scalds claimed they were the gods sharpening their spears. Whatever the truth, the men and women of the coalition knew only this. They marched not for kings nor crowns, but for the earth itself. Preparations stretched across continents. In Paris, blacksmiths worked day and night, reforging plowshares into spearheads tipped with shards of alien wreckage. In Cordoba, scholars polished vast mirrors of bronze, testing them beneath the sun until they could set hay alight at 50 paces. In Constantinople, alchemists mixed ichor with oil, whispering prayers as they sealed the deadly flasks. In the fjords of Norway, longships were fitted with great hooks of iron, meant to drag down the invaders' flying beasts should they dare the seas. The armies that gathered were unlike any in history. Knights in shining mail rode beside Moorish cavalry whose bows curved like the crescent moon. Viking raiders, their axes etched with runes, marched shoulder to shoulder with Byzantine cataphracts, clad in heavy lamellar. Peasant levies, once fodder, now bore pikes tipped in black alloy. Even monks and imams joined, carrying banners inscribed with psalms and surahs. Brother Arnulf, still the tireless chronicler, wrote, "It is as though Babel were undone. Men of 100 tongues march as one, their voices lifted not in confusion but in defiance." The destination was chosen carefully, a pit near Verona, where years before the coalition had first drawn blood. Scouts reported that the black towers had grown there, sprouting like fungi from the earth, pulsing faintly as if alive. From them came the smaller hunting beasts, prowling the countryside. If a blow could be struck here, it would echo across the wheel. Yet for all the unity, fear gnawed at the host. Around campfires, men whispered of the visions that plagued those who bore alien weapons. A Moorish archer confessed he dreamed each night of stars that bled. A Norse warrior claimed he heard voices in the dark, urging him to strike his own kin. Some deserted, fleeing into the forests, swearing mankind was meddling in powers beyond comprehension. Still, the march continued. Along the way, moments of strange kinship blossomed. A French knight taught a Moorish cavalryman to couch a lance. A Norse skald carved runes for a Byzantine boy who begged for luck. Women who followed the host as healers traded herbs, poultices, and prayers. The stories born on that march would live for centuries, proof that in the face of fire from the heavens, men and women found one another not as foes, but as kin. As they neared Verona, the ground itself seemed to change. Fields withered, rivers darkened, and the air grew heavy with a humming that set teeth on edge. At night, lights flickered upon the horizon, rising and falling like breaths. The invaders knew they were coming. On the eve of battle, the leaders gathered once more. Manuel of Byzantium, Henry of England, Yusuf of Damascus, and the Jarls of the North stood together beneath the stars. They did not speak of victory, they spoke of endurance. "If we fall," Manuel said, "let the world know we did not fall as scattered tribes, but as one people." At dawn, the horn sounded. Tens of thousands moved as a tide, banners whipping in the cold wind. Ahead, the black towers of the pit loomed, their surfaces glistening as though wet, their tops reaching hungrily toward the sky. The wheel was turning again, and mankind prepared to strike at its very spokes. Dawn broke over Verona like a blade. Mist clung to the earth, muffling the tramp of thousands of feet, the clatter of arms, the snorts of restless horses. Ahead, the alien towers loomed, black, glistening, rising like the ribs of some titanic beast half buried in the earth. They pulsed faintly, as if drawing breath, their surfaces alive with crawling veins of light. The coalition advanced in silence, each soldier feeling the weight of history on their shoulders. Priests muttered prayers, imams recited surahs, skalds whispered to Odin for strength. No man thought of plunder or glory. They thought only of survival. The first strike came without warning. The ground quaked, splitting open as machines surged forth. They were not the towering giants of earlier battles, nor the wolf beasts of recent raids, but something new, serpentine constructs of black metal, gliding across the soil with terrifying grace. Their bodies shimmered, bending light so that arrows veered aside. "Hold the line!" cried Henry of England, his knights lowering lances. The first wave thundered forward, horses screaming as they crashed into the serpents. Steel met alien alloy, sparks flew, men were hurled from saddles, but when the ichor-tipped lances struck true, the serpents shuddered and split apart, spilling black ichor across the ground. Then the air itself turned hostile. From the towers, beams of pale light lanced downward, not searing flame but waves that rattled bones and clouded minds. Men staggered, clutching their heads, their eyes bleeding. Some dropped their weapons and fled, screaming that their mothers called them from the grave. Others fell to their knees, paralyzed by visions only they could see. The Moorish scholars had prepared for this. Vast bronze mirrors, polished for months, were wheeled forward. At the shouted command, sunlight blazed upon them, reflecting into the beams. The air shimmered, light clashed with light, and for a moment the towers faltered. Cheers erupted as one of the constructs collapsed, its surface cracking under the sudden glare. But the invaders were not yet beaten. From the pit itself, a roar erupted, not sound, but vibration that shook the earth. Out crawled the great walkers, taller than cathedrals, their limbs bristling with weaponry. They strode forward, beams slicing through ranks of pikemen, crushing whole companies beneath their feet. This was the moment the coalition had prepared for. Byzantine trebuchets unleashed jars of ichor fire, shattering against the walkers' legs. White flame erupted, clinging to their joints, forcing the Titans to stumble. Norse raiders swarmed the gaps, axes glowing with shards hammered into the steel, hacking until sparks poured like rivers. Moorish horsemen circled, loosing arrows tipped in alien alloy, piercing joints and seams. The battle became a storm. Every trap laid, every weapon forged, every prayer uttered was tested against the fury of the invaders. Men died by thousands. The ground ran black with ichor and red with blood. Yet slowly, impossibly, the coalition pressed forward. One of the towers cracked under bombardment, its surface peeling like rotted bark. From within came a scream, not of metal, but of something alive. Brother Arnulf, watching from the rear, wrote later, "We saw then that the towers were no mere machines. They were creatures, rooted in the earth, feeding upon it, birthing the horrors we faced. To strike them was not to shatter stone, but to wound a beast." By dusk, the field was a graveyard. Countless lay dead, their banners torn, their bodies mingled with broken machines. But the pit itself smoked, its towers collapsing, its glow fading into silence. For the first time in history, mankind had not merely survived. They had destroyed one of the enemy's strongholds. The cheers were ragged, weary but real. Men embraced strangers, kissed the ground, raised their bloody swords to the heavens. Yet as night fell, survivors spoke of the visions that had haunted them in battle. Dreams of the wheel, of countless worlds burning, of voices whispering that this victory was but another turn. And on the horizon the sky flickered with new lights, as though the stars themselves had begun to shift. The wheel was far from broken, but for one night, mankind believed it could be. The smoke of Verona's pit clung to the land for weeks, black and acrid, seeping into fields and rivers. Corpses, human and alien alike, lay in tangled heaps, and the stench of ichor burned the throat worse than fire. Yet for all the horror, the battle was hailed as a triumph beyond imagining. Messengers sped in all directions, bearing news of the victory. In Rome, bells tolled for 7 days, and Pope Lucius declared it a miracle wrought by divine favor. He named the fallen knights martyrs, their blood mingled with ichor as proof of heaven's will. In Cordoba, scholars proclaimed the battle a jihad not of faiths divided, but of all mankind under Allah's gaze. In the north, skalds sang that Odin himself had guided the axes that felled the giants. But interpretation soon became contention. The Pope claimed the victory as Christendom's triumph, urging all to convert before joining further campaigns. The imams bristled, declaring the credit belonged to faith unbound by Rome. The Norse scoffed at both, saying strength alone had carried the day. The coalition had held, but beneath the unity, old rivalries stirred like embers under ash. Meanwhile, Verona became a place of pilgrimage. Peasants came to touch the ground where the towers had fallen, carrying away shards of black stone as relics. Priests warned that the fragments whispered at night, but still the people sought them, believing they carried divine power. Some even drank diluted ichor, claiming visions of angels and saints. Others went mad, clawing their own eyes until only sockets remained. Kings seized what they could. Henry of England demanded the smiths of Verona forge swords from the wreckage, while Manuel of Byzantium ordered pieces of alien alloy shipped to Constantinople for study. Moorish scholars begged to preserve the remains intact for understanding, not plunder. Their pleas went largely ignored. In victory, greed awoke where fear had once bound. And yet, for all the quarrels, the victory mattered. Armies swelled with volunteers. Men who had once hidden in forests now carried spears proudly. Women followed as healers and foragers, swearing to bear their share of the burden. Children played at slaying giants, their sticks tipped with shards of glass painted black. Hope, fragile, dangerous, intoxicating, spread like wildfire. But hope carried blindness. Few heeded the warning signs. Farmers near Verona found their fields barren. The soil turned to gray dust where the towers had stood. Shepherds reported sheep born with twisted limbs after grazing on grass touched by ichor. At night, strange lights flickered still in the ruins, as though embers of something greater smoldered beneath. Brother Arnulf wrote, "We rejoiced, yes, but the air stank of sin and sorrow. I saw boys drink black water and fall dead. I saw relics glow like embers in the dark, though no fire touched them. If this is victory, then it is a victory we may not endure." The invaders did not strike back at once. The skies above Europe grew strangely quiet. Some dared to hope the enemy had been truly wounded, perhaps even frightened. But the wiser voices, scholars, monks, jarls, spoke otherwise. The wheel turned in silence as well as in fire. The enemy had not vanished. It was watching, adapting, preparing. And so, while mankind quarreled and grasped at the spoils of Verona, shadows gathered beyond the stars. The quiet after Verona lasted less than a season. In the late summer of 1182, the skies above Alexandria split apart. Witnesses swore the heavens themselves bled fire. The invaders descended not with hunters or giants, but with something unseen before, vast hovering shapes that eclipsed the sun, their undersides alive with shifting lights. They did not march, nor stalk. They unmade. The harbor boiled. Ships crumbled into ash before they touched the water. The great lighthouse, one of the wonders of the world, shimmered as though wrapped in heat, then folded in on itself, collapsing into dust that blew away on the wind. Entire streets vanished without flame or ruin. Stone, wood, and flesh alike simply erased, leaving smooth glass where once life bustled. There was no battle. There was no defense. Alexandria, jewel of learning, cradle of libraries, was unmade in a single day. Survivors fled inland, dazed, many blind, their skin burned not by fire, but by light itself. When news reached Acre and Constantinople, the coalition trembled. Verona had shown the invaders could bleed. Alexandria showed that mankind's greatest triumphs could vanish with a gesture. The message was clear. Defiance would not go unanswered. Yet the destruction carried more than terror, it carried confusion. Why Alexandria? The city had not led armies against the pits. It had not forged the ichor weapons in secret workshops. It had merely been a place of learning, of trade, of faiths intertwined. Scholars whispered that this was the very reason. The invaders feared knowledge more than blades. Books could outlast swords. ideas could outlast towers. If true, the loss was greater than any battlefield defeat. Thousands of manuscripts, Greek, Egyptian, Arabic, were gone in smoke and silence. Knowledge painstakingly preserved across centuries had been erased in an instant. It was not only lives the invaders sought, but memory itself. The world reeled. In Paris, priests preached that mankind had been punished for pride. In Damascus, imams wept at the loss of texts carried from Baghdad and beyond. In Norway, skalds told their people that the gods themselves had been struck down. For the first time since the coalition's founding, despair returned in full measure. And yet, amid the sorrow, something stirred. Survivors of Alexandria carried scraps of texts in hidden satchels. A scribe named Samira claimed she had memorized entire passages of lost treatises, swearing to rewrite them from memory. Moorish caravans risked death to preserve fragments of maps, astrolabes, and instruments. The invaders had sought to erase knowledge, but in doing so, they had awakened a fiercer devotion to it. Brother Arnulf recorded, "They tried to unmake a city, but instead they made it eternal. For now every man and woman who remembers Alexandria carries it within them, and none can erase what is written in the soul." Still, the wheel turned, and the coalition faced its greatest question yet. If Verona had proven mankind could wound, and Alexandria had proven mankind could be erased, then which path lay ahead? To fight harder or to despair? To fracture or to unite anew? The invaders had shown the price of victory. Would mankind pay it?